April contract.
All right, thank you. Welcome back, House Government Operations and Military Affairs. Today is Tuesday, January 14th, and we are going to begin taking testimony and having conversations around a election issue in the Bennington 1 district. Committee, before we get going, I know we touched on this a little bit last week, sort of about table decorum and protocol. I just want to reiterate that raise your hand. I will keep a mental note of who's in the queue. And I really want to maintain that as like a very strict order of operations and rules of engagement. We're going to have a lot of conversations going in and out of this particular subject. And I just want to be very clear that I prefer that as our operating method. So if I'm not here, Vice Chair Representative Hangle will lead the conversation, and should both of us have to be somewhere else, defer to our ranking member, Representative Waters-Evans. So that was just one little procedural footnote I'd like to just reiterate before we get going. And with that, we are on a tight clock today because Vice Chair Hango and I need to go to a meeting at 2. So we are going to start off with representatives from the Secretary of State's office. Deputy Secretary, Director, if you could.
Good afternoon. For the record, Lauren Hibbert, Deputy Secretary of State.
Sean Sheehan, Director of Elections.
Thank you so much for having us this afternoon to talk about Bennington 1. We tried to guess what you folks might be thinking about, what questions you may have. And we think that you may have 3 major questions. What happened? How do we prevent this from happening in the future? And what should be done now? So I'm going to talk about what happened, and then Sean will take it from there. So as many of you may know, and there's some new members here, hi. The legislature is required to do reapportionment every 10 years in response to the United States Census. That happened in 2022, and this committee played a really crucial role in that process. And Act 89 of 2022 designated new boundaries for legislative districts. In the process of updating the district boundaries, that involves many different parties. It includes the Secretary of State Elections Division, the town clerks, 911 staff, and many other people. Our role, the Secretary of State's role, is around the election management system, which the town clerks use to maintain their districts. And the town clerks assign districts based on street maps and street segments within their towns. And so voters are assigned by their addresses in our election management system. And that is how the town clerks maintain their voter checklist for each district. And then clerks and BCA do have questions about a residence and relative to the district boundaries on the maps that the legislature creates, and then they work with E911 staff to clarify. So that's the basic overview of how the maps, the legislative work, the reapportionment work gets absorbed by the Secretary of State's office and the town clerks to be operationalized to make the voter checklists. In Pownell, a mistake was made. On the boundary roads, there was a center line that was specified as the division between 2 legislative districts, Bennington 1 and Bennington 5. And in the process, some residents were misaligned. And what happened?
Right. So with what happened then, so with that mistake being made, it meant that the voters who were misassigned in Pownell's voter checklist for 2022, they were considered to be members of the other House district in town. So people who on the legislature's map should have been in Bennington 1 or in Bennington 5 and vice versa. That meant those impacted voters received that other district's ballots for both the primary election and the general election in both 2022 and in 2024. It's important to note that this error didn't lie with the distribution of ballots. The voters received the ballots for the district associated with their name on the town of Pownell's voter checklist. As mentioned, they're just assigned to the wrong district based on where they lived. Where that came into play for the 2024 general election in Bennington 1 is that the number of registered voters who couldn't properly vote in the Bennington 1 House district, in other words, people who on the map should have been in Bennington 1 but received the Bennington 5 ballot, was 56 voters. That was greater than the margin of victory, 23 votes after the recount. So that's why this is an issue for Bennington 1. While it also impacted Bennington 5, there was a much larger, that race wasn't close, so it wasn't an issue there. That's why we're talking about Bennington 1. Ostensibly, election officials, candidates, or voters could have caught this issue in the run-up to either the 2022 or the 2024 election. That's because one of the checks and balances that are in place in statute is 17 VSA 2501D, which requires the Board of Civil Authority to post prominent notices in and around the polling places, urging voters to check whether they've been placed on the proper geographical checklist. The statute continues on to say the notice shall also explain the procedures by which a voter who's on the wrong checklist for his or her geographical area can be added to the proper checklist and vote at the proper polling place. Understanding is the BCA fulfilled their posting requirement according to statute. However, no issues were raised with the checklists for either the Bennington 1 or the Bennington 5 districts before or on the days of the elections in 2022 or 2024. It was brought to light after the November election. And at that point is when the issue was raised.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, please, Representative.
Clarification, Billy. A lot of towns use the same polling place for different districts. Do they use this, since they're right across the street from each other, they use the same polling place?
My understanding, Pownell has the same polling place, but would put up the checklist for Bennington 1 next to each other. So while the second question, how do we prevent this from happening in the future? I realize that's not the urgent question at hand of resolving this piece, and we'll get to that, but we did want to at least speak briefly to that question, as it's of keen interest to us, and I'm sure to all of you as well. Starting with the specific, Pownell's checklists have already been corrected. Pownell's Board of Civil Authority met on November 18th to review the voter checklist. The clerk pulled the BCA together after this was brought to light. They identified the erroneously assigned voters. That's where we and the Attorney General will speak to more of the details of the numbers and what's in their report. They have it in the report that came from the Pownell BCA. And the Pownell town clerk subsequently corrected the checklist. So that specific issue in Pownell is corrected going forward. More generally speaking, across the states, and Pownell is one of 247 cities and towns whose clerks we work with. Because Vermont elections are conducted at the local level, really efforts to ensure checklist accuracy is a collaborative process, collaborative effort. My team, the elections division, works closely to engage these 247 clerks on trainings and to ask them. We on that front, we can ask them and will ask them to affirmatively state that they've reviewed their checklists with a particular focus on boundary roads for those towns that have multi-districts. Obviously, this isn't an issue in towns that just have one district in the town. Our office also manages the statewide computer system that clerks use to maintain their checklists, and we manage the IT contractors who maintain the system. We're going to be launching a new election management system this spring, and so we have clerks involved with the testing. We're in the final stages of our internal and user testing. We'll be bringing in the clerks for that stage of the testing. Certainly a big part once we get clear of town meeting day and we're then permitted to clean up checklists, which we can't do 90 days before an election. That was going to be a big focus of ours anyway, this issue in Bennington 1, regardless. And so we'll have a lot of trainings, working closely with clerks on how to use the new system, how to maintain the checklists, and this focus on making sure, particularly boundary roads, that their BCA take a close look at who's on their checklists will be front and center there. We also send a survey to clerks after town meeting day and follow up with calls to any non-respondents. These are just touch points to make sure that clerks have checked the boxes of their obligations and responsibilities and help us coordinate in that manner, allow us to provide support to those clerks and BCA in maintaining their voter checklists. That's on the general front. Back on the Bennington One side, the question of what should be done. I think to start, to be clear, the decision of what to do belongs squarely with the House as directed by Vermont's Constitution and affirmed by the courts. Our office, Lauren, myself, the whole Secretary of State's office is dedicated to free, fair, and accessible elections. We're happy to play an advisory role as the House grapples with its options. And at a high level, it would seem to us that the House's options range from, number one, from conducting a district-wide revote, to two, conducting a partial revote, or three, affirming the candidate who received the most vote. On the first path, the district-wide revote, there necessitates several logistical questions that would need to be answered. To maximize participation and be as consistent as possible with the general election, we would think voters would have the opportunity to have the same length of time to vote as they would in the general election, that 45 days, have ballots get to them 45 days before the election. On our side, we would need to work with our printing vendor. We'd need at least 2 weeks to get to them. So if the House opted for this path, we would need that election to be set at least 2 months to allow time for the ballots to be prepared, printed, and then the 45 days for the election. The advantage of this path would assure that every voter in the Bennington One House district has a chance to vote. Further, voters would have the opportunity to vote on an equal footing to every other voter in the district at the same time with the same information. Fair and proper elections treat all voters equally, giving them equal access to the information necessary to vote, equal access to the time and manner of voting. The big disadvantage of this option would be, two that come to mind are delayed results and voter turnout challenges. Even if it was set today, which we know we're not close to that, you're still talking about the end of March before the election is resolved. And that would, would have an impact for the constituents of Bennington One.
Director, I think we have a question here from.
Real quick, I believe I'm hearing what you're saying is that it would be a total mail out to the whole district, or if it was, you're probably getting to it, but if it was a partial, it would be a partial, full mail out to the partial component. In other words,
Correct.
just like the general election.
Yes.
Okay,
Back that up. I got distracted by a Pepsi fall.
No, I just asked, I assumed from his words that meant a total mail out. If we did a full revote, everybody get mailed a ballot.
Okay,
Whole
gotcha.
district, and a partial for that partial component would get it versus you just show up if you want to vote the old way, the old school
Gotcha.
way.
Yep, I see.
Yeah, yes, I was clarifying. I thought that was the answer, but it's not clarity.
Yes. Yeah, that was how we contemplated here. Again, recognizing it's the House's issue to remedy, but the way general elections are run in statute with that timeline and the mailing, we understood replicating.
Sorry, a little sort of distracted.
Yeah, no problem at all.
And this is why we put the cheap rug in.
Yeah, didn't hear anything short circuit or it looks like all the screens are still working.
It's a little spillover.
And the other, sorry.
Is that it?
I have a question. So when you're issuing a new ballot, it's every race on the ballot. It's not just for this one.
Oh, no, in this case, it would just be for this one.
Oh, it would just,
Yeah.
so it wouldn't be the intent.
Well, right.
Okay.
All the other results that have been certified have been final.
Oh, okay.
This would just be for this one particular race. I
Thank
think.
Representative Pistol.
Would the ballots be sent to just those who voted Or would it go to everybody so everybody would have a chance to vote?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are part of the logistical questions to be answered. Our understanding of it would be go to everybody, all active voters, just like any other general election ballot does. It goes mailed to every active voter in the district.
Did we have a question over here?
The other big disadvantage of this path would likely be the voter turnout. As you know, presidential elections tend to have the highest voter turnout. Any statewide, we had over 70% turnout both this presidential election and in 2020, the highest in Vermont's history, with the combination of the vote by mail, the window of time, all the voter outreach efforts, and the attention that the presidential elections get. It's hard to expect that the voter turnout will be as great in an election just for one seat. So that certainly is a consideration of the advantages and disadvantages. Moving to the second path on the menu that we saw, just that partial revote path. Again, that could be a few variations, and I think it's when the Attorney General's team looks at it, when you read the Attorney General's report, you'll see that folks in Bennington County were advocating for various variations on the partial revote path. And those interested parties have called for variously distributing ballots to active voters who did not receive Bennington 1 ballots, or having the whole town of Pownell do a revote, but not the other 4 towns. The advantages for this path compared to the first is certainly it would be lower cost and easier logistics than doing a district-wide revote. But the significant disadvantages include the unequal treatment of voters across the 5 towns, as the new voters would be operating with different information and on a different timeline than those voters who voted months ago. The third path of affirming the candidate who received the most votes, certainly the most straightforward path. There may be variations, but we don't see variations on that path. The advantages would be the option that this option means Bennington 1 citizens would have a consistent representation in the State House as soon as possible, and likely would have the support of the largest number of voters, again, with the highest turnout being from on a presidential ballot. The disadvantages are, of course, that the option excludes those voters who should have had the opportunity to vote in the district. So that's at a very high level kind of paths. There's other menu options that can and may come up, but those are what we wanted to lay out. It's what we saw as major options for this.
Representative Hooper, Randolph.
We have developing understanding of how the voters in those districts feel.
We do not. I mean, the Secretary of State has not gone out and polled those voters. That would be really outside of our jurisdiction.
Even the Attorney General may speak to some of it. I think some of the appendices.
I think it's a delicate thing, but it's an important thing to consider.
Okay, first, did I see your hand, Representative? Yes. Please.
Has precedents been set for this type of thing in the past?
Actually, on the House Clerk's website, there is a document on contested elections in the past. None of them are exactly like this scenario, but it does detail contested elections over the past 50 years. Some have some similarities, at least based on that report. In every case, they did affirm the candidate with more votes, is my understanding from reading that document. But again, this exact situation there wasn't exact precedent for.
So there's some case precedents that we'll go over. I believe the most recent case that is the most relevant to this, where it was about a roll itself, was Kennedy versus Chittenden in 1983. And that is the most relevant one that I've been shown. And that is the conversations we're going to have further in the week with legislative council and other members. Yeah, great question. Representative Hooper, Burlington.
So I've been distracted, missed something. Where does the actual fault happen? Did
So-
I mean, you have a district that had a candidate showing up at their door that they shouldn't have recognized. You had ballots that they shouldn't have recognized. Where, I can't imagine that somebody didn't say, hey, wait.
So the error started when the boundary lines for the district were entered into the system,
Okay.
right after the reapportionment process and the act in 2022.
So
But it was not caught in the 22 election nor the 24 election until after the election.
wow. Thanks.
I do want to be conscious of time. So please continue.
Well, that's the extent of our testimony.
Beautiful. Any other questions from members?
I don't think I've caught your name. I don't think we met.
Absolutely. Sean,
Yeah, okay.
I'm the elections director at Secretary of State.
So I guess my only question is, you discussed like a 2-month process for the new vote. Would that still be the case for a partial vote? It's still the same thing. It's still the same 2 weeks.
It would be because
And
the
then
statute,
45. Yeah,
the House would be ordering is a general election, whether to the whole or to the partial. And the statutes mandate universal vote by mail in a 45-day window. So
understood. Okay.
particularly with UOCAVA and military voters, we need that 45 days to get folks their ballots.
Understood. Thank you. All right. If that's all we have for the folks from Secretary of State, we will move on to the Attorney General office.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Obstacle course to get to the witness chair.
Yeah, you know, we're gonna have a new room in a couple of weeks and it's gonna have a less trip hazards.
Yeah, your lawyer would love that.
Yeah, no, totally. And my insurance adjuster. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, thanks for having us. I am Attorney General Charity Clark, and with me is Leslie Welts, who is one of the few people who helped me lead the whole office. And she is an Assistant Attorney General and the Chief of our General Counsel and Administrative Law Division. I know that you've heard from the Secretary of State, so I don't want to repeat anything, but I think what's helpful is just to provide kind of overview of our role basically in this, and then we can answer any questions that you might have. We do have, of course, submitted the report, and it's on, I checked, was posted on the website, so you have it, and everything that basically we'll be saying is contained in the report. So I wish I could take credit for writing that, but Leslie wrote it and she did a very good job. So first, when we looked at this, we look at our assignment and we just look in the statute, which is very clear. And it says that the Secretary of State shall notify the Attorney General and we shall investigate the facts and prepare an opinion on the law and the facts and send it to the Clerk of the House. So that's what we have done. So we're here really to talk about the facts and the opinion on the law and the facts. So just a orientation on the timeline that we have for us on November after in terms of, I should say, a timeline in terms of the requests challenging the election. So we all remember the election was November 5th. On November 23rd, candidate Bruce Busa filed for a revote. And then we have 45 Pownell residents, we call them the Pownell 45 in the report. They filed on November 28th, asking to send us our ballots for the Bennington 1 House District so we can vote in our district. Then the third was on November 21st, the Stamford Board of Civil Authority request determination, recognizing all voters who recognize in the district who received the wrong ballot, and giving them a chance to vote. And then the Reedsboro Board of Civil Authority on December 5th had the identical request. So those are our 4 requests relating to the election contesting the election. So I know you, because I was watching remotely, I know you are short on time. I can kind of tick through a summary.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, all right.
No, that's great. I
Don't belabor it.
level. For
Yes.
today. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, exactly. We also attached some maps, and I'm a visual person, so that helps me. I looked at the map of the district, like the Pownell district. I know this is like not even perfect, but I literally looked up the roads that were at issue and I printed like a map off of Google. I could pass that around for anyone who thinks like I do. I don't know if it's helpful, but for me, it was like, I just want to see this area. So there is this new district, Secretary of State's office had testified about the redistricting, this new district, which is all of Reedsboro, Searsburg, Stamford, and Woodford, and a portion of Pownell. And the portion, let's see, we have, so we've got the Route 7 area, and then we have these roads, Barber Pond Road, South Stream Road, and then it has a great name. What is it? Moonrise Road, I think. It's Moonrise Drive, like 6 people who live there. So that's the area where we're talking about. In the general election on November 5th, the results were certified on November 12th, and it was Jonathan Cooper, 1,265 votes, and Bruce Busa, 1,240 votes. There was a recount. Let's see, I'm skipping here, but that wasn't the final tally. The final tally was the same for Jonathan Cooper, 1,265, and 2 more for Bruce Busa, 1,242. So there was a margin of 23.
23. Yes.
Yeah. The recount was on November 18th, just giving us our timeline. When the town clerk had realized that there were errors on the checklist, it was November 7th. So 2 days later, she immediately started reviewing all of the checklists and scheduled a Board of Civil Authority meeting. So they met the following day, that day, and determined that 56 voters who were on the Bennington 5 checklist should have been on the Bennington 1 checklist. So we've got our separation of 23 votes and we've got 56 people. Did you guys already go over this? Am I belaboring things?
A bit, but this is, I mean, it's your report, so.
Okay, yeah, that's really what we focused on, the facts reports. Yeah.
Timeline, the Board of Civil Authority met on the 18th, which was the same day as the.
Yeah, the same day. Yeah, okay. Okay, so what was our job? We're gathering facts. So this is what we did to gather the facts. We spoke to a variety of people. We spoke to the Secretary of State's office, of course, the Bennington 1 House District Clerk, the county clerk, the Pownell Town Clerk. And we also reviewed maps. We looked at case law. We looked at recent old decisions. We looked at 3 reports from the Attorney General's office, not decisions, reports over the past recent meeting. There was like 3 over the past 30 years. So that's what we did to prepare the report that we sent to you. So the question now is, now what? Our role is almost at an end here. We have the report, we're really laying out the facts, and it's kind of your shop to decide what to go forward on. But in general, let me just say that the Constitution provides broad authority to you all to call a new election or accept the certified results. And the language in the Constitution is very broad itself. The representatives so chosen shall have power to judge of the election and qualifications of their own members. There is a case that we cite in our brief. I read it because I found it helpful to understand, although it's not totally on point. There's a lot of important info, I think, just in terms of your role and why this is truly your role. So it's the Kennedy case. If you really are interested, I would recommend reading that or giving it a look. Really, this is a policy matter for you all to decide. And when it comes to a lot of the expertise here, we would defer to our friends at the Secretary of State's office. And there's various factors to consider that I'm sure you've already started considering, but we wanted to be able to come and present overview of what our report looks like. But it's all in there if you want to do a deep dive, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Representative, are there any considerable legal constraints to outreach from us, them, view to the voters of this? Like, do we have to?
I would say that, I'm sure you've heard from your own legislative counsel on this, but I would want to kind of defer to them unless Leslie wants to weigh in on this.
I'll just say that we did receive a petition from the town of Pownell voters who were affected. There are, I think, 57 names on that and 29 signatures. So that's attached, that's an attachment, attachment C. So you could take a look at that to see what those voters are asking.
Representative.
My question, of the 56 voters that got the wrong ballot, how many of those voted, do we know?
So they voted, it was just the incorrect representative, the race for the.
So the 56, they all 56
Well,
voted.
I don't know about
No,
that.
I'm-
Yeah.
Of the, yeah, 56 got the wrong ballot, but I wanted to know
What
if
percentage?
10 only voted,
Yeah.
or,
It's good, that's a good thought.
Would you be able to answer the ability to look into?
Yes.
that would be good information, because if 56 didn't bother voting, then regardless,
Mhm.
but if 23 voted and voted on the wrong ticket, then that's something to look at, those, because they could have gone the other way had they had the proper ticket. That none of the 56 voted. I mean, I just was curious as to of the 56, how many voted.
No, that's a great question. Yeah, and they'll mine that info for us and let us know. Representative Coffin.
I guess on that same tone, do we know how many blank vote? They're not, I'm seeing it here, the blank votes total with the 54 and blank votes 108. This was, the 54 was just in the town of Powell that didn't vote.
56?
Yeah, where it says blank votes. Where I'm looking at this.
Sorry.
Which attachment is that, Representative?
This is on the,
A through H. Yeah.
this is on the statement that that was
Yeah,
just
the
being
report.
read.
Oh, the
The
report?
report,
Page 8, I think.
page 8 of the, yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to get my head on what portion of Pownell had blank votes? Like, was that in District 1 or District 5? Because how many blank votes were in District 5? If they were District 1 voters that chose not to vote for either representative on that, because they're like, this is not the person I was looking for. How many blank votes were in Bennington 5?
They're all, oh, yeah. Yeah, these are all, so. And this is an attachment H. This is in my report. I mean, it's, you're referencing attachment H. So this is all Bennington 1 info.
Didn't know if you had any Bennington 5 votes, and how many blank votes were in 5.
Oh.
Because that would, in a way, say, if those 56 said, this is not the person on our.
So,
I will, I'm sorry.
oh, I'm sorry. Commissioner Hibbert? Sorry, Secretary.
We would be able to tell you the number of blank votes in Bennington 1 and in Bennington 5, but we cannot tell you whether any of these particularly affected voters voted in a blank manner. Because we don't know which ballots belong to those specific voters.
I understand that. I was just looking for the number of blank votes in Bennington 5.
We can provide that number to you.
Thank you.
As Leslie Welch, Attorney General's office, I also will note, recall where it is, it's one of the footnotes that I provided in my report mentions that there were some write-ins in District 5 for candidates in District 1. So there is a little bit of information on that, but I did not look at all the details in District 5 since that wasn't what the request was regarding.
So you're saying the write-ins in Bennington 5 for the candidates who are in Bennington 1?
Yes, and I found it here.
Variable.
It's on page 7 and footnote 12. This is my report. I don't know if it's a different format on yours, but there it is. So you'll see that I wrote there that further evidence of the error appeared on some of the Bennington 5 House District ballots, some of which included write-in votes that appear to have been for the Bennington 1 candidates. So you can see there.
And along that vein, those ballots clearly did not have that person's name on them, correct? And that's why it was written in.
That's right. The only distinction between the appearance in the Bennington 1 and Bennington 5 district ballots, this is my understanding from my interviews, aside from the title on the ballot saying that which district it was the House race. So all of the Senate, the statewide, all of those candidates are identical. The ballots were identical.
Mhm. No, and I reviewed the report the first time. I appreciated that, like, as a, a kind of identifying that on the other side of the ballot coin, that there was a public recollection that they were writing in the correct candidates in their district. So, any other questions from the table? So I don't think I have much else for you folks right now. This was really us just doing the first formal sit down to start to digest it as a committee as a whole. We are definitely my goal right now moving forward is to do about an hour and a half to 2 hours from varied testimony. So throughout the course of the next 2 weeks, at the very least. So we are definitely going to be tapping your shoulders to come back in and have a deeper conversations with us. But I appreciate the time and effort that went into generating this. And it was a delightful early Christmas present, I would say. My in-laws kept wondering what I was doing in my father-in-law's office.
Yeah, one final question. Between your office and the Secretary of State's office, we're 100% sure that the numbers that we're talking about are the people who were denied suffrage and the ones who inappropriately voted. There's not going to be any wiggle at some point in time.
I don't think I understand your question. Sorry.
Numbers you're quoting are.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the Pownell Board of Civil Authority is the authority on this, and that was their determination. So
Okay.
we rely on that, but we understand them to be the authority.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks for having us.
No, thank you so much, Attorney General, Assistant Attorney General. We will definitely be in touch and also coming in for a deeper dive on the report.
Great.
So thank you. All right, committee, that actually moved a little bit more efficiently than I thought it was going to. So we have some time on our hands. Vice Chair Hango and I have to peel off in a few minutes here and go to another meeting for 2:00. So Representative Waters Evans is just going to have a discussion with you folks about a elections conference that she attended, or a series of meetings last weekend, and just kind of give you a snapshot at what she did, what she learned, and just a little bit of infill on like NCSL and the resources they provide to us as legislators. That meeting was kind of a follow-up to one that I participated in over the summer. So I was glad she was able to go. But once you wrap up that conversation with Representative Waters Evans, you're free for the day. We have nothing else after that. So use the time how you wish. And then we're back on tomorrow morning, 9:30 for an introduction with the Joint Fiscal Office, just on what they do for us as a resource. And with that,